Good morning, everybody. I'm Kristen Hall, Head of Industry with Google Chicago. I'm very pleased to welcome you here to our Google Chicago office. We are coming to you live via YouTube web stream to talk about what makes a job seeker highly effective. And I'm very pleased this morning to introduce Steve Rothberg, founder of College Recruiter, who will be our moderator and leader for today's discussion. Steve?
Thank you, Kristen.
Thanks, Kristen.
So it's great to be in Chicago. The weather is very Chicago-like in the summertime.
Very hot.
Very hot, very warm. Anybody in a cold climate, come here. You'll be very comfortable today. So I'm Stephen Rothberg. I'm the founder of College Recruiter. College Recruiter is an interactive recruitment media company. We help students and recent graduates find great careers. I recently joined the DeVry University Career Advisory Board, which is what's kind of putting on the presentation today. I'm joined by Alexandra Levitt, author, speaker, published person, somebody who has a very, very long Wikipedia profile. So
it's not on Wikipedia, it's not real.
Exactly, lots of people know you. If you want to tell people a little bit more about your background, and then we can kind of have Madeline, I'll introduce Madeline and we'll get into the content.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexandra Levitt. I'm a business and workplace author, speaker, and consultant. I'm also the co-founder of the Career Advisory Board, which was established by DeVry University in 2010, so we're in our 6th year. And we are dedicated to helping all job seekers advance. And so one of the things we're going to be doing today is talking about exactly how you can do that. And very pleased to be here today. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. And Madeline Slutsky from DeVry University, the other co-founder of the...
Well, not co-founder, but other
co-chair,
right?
Sorry, co-chair of the Career Advisory Board,
co-chair
and Vice President of Career and Student Services for DeVry University.
Just quickly, I've been in the industry a long time, helping many, many people get jobs over the years and connecting employers to great talent through career services. So that's my story.
And you're sticking to it.
Exactly.
All right. I am going to just switch over to share the desktop. And then we're going to have Alex run through a little bit of a presentation. So let's go share desktop and here. And then I will switch over to presentation mode.
Okay.
Here we go.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to be talking about over the next 15, 20 minutes or so, before we go to our panel, some research that the Career Advisory Board has undertaken on career and job search trends for everyone, but specifically with a focus on millennials and Gen Xers, so the younger side of the equation. So what is a millennial, first of all, just to level set where we're at here? So Generation X is a very small generation. There's only about 40 million in the United States alone. And they were born roughly 1964 to 1979. And then we have the early millennials, born 1980 to 1986. So for the most part, they are our rising leaders in the workforce. And then we have our late millennials, born 1987 to 1995. And actually, what sets the early and late millennials apart from one another is something that we uncovered during research we did a few years ago. This was also Career Advisory Board research that determined that the early millennials have a different set of qualities, a different set of attributes, because they graduated from university. We're talking about professionals here. They graduated prior to the recession, whereas the late millennials graduated from college during or after the recession. And so for this reason, there are qualitative differences between how early millennials and late millennials come to the table in terms of both their job search and their career aspirations. Let's talk for a moment about millennials and leadership. Here you see everybody's poster child here. You know, Mark Zuck, he's frequently cited when we talk about millennial leaders. And the thing to remember about the early millennials in particular is that they are not the entry-level kids anymore. Typically, we talk about millennials and we say the millennials are coming into the workforce. Well, the fact is the oldest millennials are turning 36 years old this year. So they are, in large part, not the junior level people anymore, but the leaders. And in fact, according to a study I did with Deloitte back in 2014, we asked about 20,000 global millennial professionals, are you a leader? Meaning, do you have decision-making authority? Do you have at least 2 direct reports? Half of them globally told us they already were leaders. And so the implication of this is that the millennials are entering leadership positions an average of 10 years earlier than prior generations. Why is this happening? Well, you can look at it in terms of demographics, right? So you have the baby boomers, who we didn't talk about, but they were, prior to the millennials, the largest generation in American history, about 75 million baby boomers in the United States alone. But the baby boomers, while their retirement was a little bit delayed because of the recession, they are starting to exit traditional jobs in droves. And who is going to be available to replace them? Well, we look at the next generation, Generation X, which was the first group that we mentioned in the last slide. And Generation X, as I said, was a tiny generation, only 40 million. So you just do the simple math there. There simply aren't enough Generation Xers to take over for the baby boomers. And that's why you have the millennials entering leadership positions earlier than previous generations. Now, here's the thing about millennials. If you ask them, and they tend to be a very confident generation in general, but if you ask them, do you feel ready to be leaders? A full third of them will say they don't feel ready, even if they've been in the position for a couple of years. And this is scary because these are the people who are the future of our organization. And so when we look at career and job search trends, the fact that they are underconfident when it comes to their career growth and development is something that we have to think about. Moving on to the Career Advisory Board's research, we actually do a study called the Job Preparedness Indicator. In 2016, it's in its 5th year, so we've been looking annually at the gaps between what hiring managers are looking for and what candidates are bringing to the table. And this year we looked at 500 US-based hiring managers, so this is a United States study. And we looked at 23 skills, and so I'm not going to read all of them off for you, but there are just a few here: integrity, work ethic, time management, written communication, adaptability. These are things that when we look and ask hiring managers, what are important skills that you look for, these are some of the things they mention. And so specifically what we wanted to find out was, are the candidates coming through your doors meeting these criteria? Do they have these skills? And if they don't, what do you recommend that they do in order to acquire these skills in a more efficient manner? So what did we find this year in JPI? Now, as I mentioned, we're in our 6th year. So one thing that we found, and this has actually been a trend for a couple of years now, but unfortunately, as it becomes more of a job seekers market, we don't see this trend really going anywhere, which makes me concerned for hiring managers because generally they are pretty unrealistic. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that when we look at those list of 23 skills that they said were important, they expect candidates to come through the door having a checkbox next to every single one of those things. And by the way, you also have to be from the perfect industry. You have to be from the perfect background. You have to have graduated from a top university. You have to be the perfect interviewer. Essentially, they want somebody who has the complete and total package and aren't really willing to say, maybe this person is strong in X, but we'll have to train them a little bit on Y. Now, this was okay a few years ago because there were more job seekers on the market than companies knew what to do with. But as I said, as it becomes more of a job seekers market with the recession well behind us, this is going to be a problem because you're going to see that positions are going to be left empty for many, many, many months, and that the people who are still doing the jobs of 2 and 3 individuals will start to burn out, and then they will leave, and then you will need to fill more positions. Another thing that we saw this year with JPI is that character trumps skills. Now, of course, while the hiring managers said that all of these skills and traits are important, what's the most important? The most important is integrity. It's character. It's whether you're honest. It's whether you can be trusted. And if we look at the recent developments in the corporate world, what has happened to particular companies, we can understand why companies are a little bit gun shy. Now, when we look at entry level, mid-level, and senior level, and we did look at all 3, the gaps actually are at the senior level, where we're seeing that hiring managers are expecting senior level candidates to come in and be the complete package, and they're very disappointed when they aren't. The more experience an individual has, the more those skills are expected to be there once you get to a certain level. Okay, so thank you, Kristen. According to the Job Preparedness Indicator research, so just a few other little tidbits here that are interesting. So I mentioned that the largest gaps were at the senior level. However, one thing that's really promising that I love is that we see a narrowing skills gap at the entry and the mid-level. So we've been talking about probably for the last 10 years about this skills gap, about how college graduates are coming to the table without being prepared to have jobs. And we see that increasingly this is changing, that universities are preparing college students a little bit better for the work world, and they're coming out with some of these skills already. So this is really, really good news, and it's probably one of the reasons I'm so happy I do my job, because I feel like I actually see the needle moving here. An increase toward commonality. And this is also an interesting thing. This is what we mean by that. So commonality is you take a skill like integrity, and you see that when you walk in, let's say in 2006, into a job interview situation, a hiring manager might say only 1 out of 10 people has really high integrity. Well, commonality means that they're seeing that individual skill of integrity more often. So today in 2016, they might say, hey, 8 out of 10 people that I'm seeing have that skill of integrity, have that trait of integrity. Now, this still doesn't mean that hiring managers think that individuals are the complete package. Again, they don't have all 23 skills, but when it comes to how often we're seeing things like integrity or effective interpersonal communication, like these are being seen more often. They're not as rare as they used to be. And then finally, this year, what made JPI a little bit different is that we asked about career change, because we were noting that many more people were interested in switching industries, in switching roles midway through their careers. So we asked the hiring managers, do you think that the people coming through your doors who are coming from different industries or different roles, are they successfully convincing you that they are ready to make this change? And unfortunately, the news here isn't quite as good. The hiring managers felt that job seekers can do a much better job at translating their experience so that it is a good fit for the new role, at showing how they'll be able to hit the ground running immediately, that they'll require minimal training. They think that there's a little work to be done here. So if you are a job seeker who's considering making a career change, and we'll talk about this, remember that you have to customize your materials for that new industry, for that new role. You can't rely on the hiring managers to figure out how you're going to be a good fit. You have to tell them explicitly. The next piece of research that I'd love to just touch on a little bit is our successful job seekers research that we conducted in the summer of 2015, so about 10 months ago. And when we looked at the Job Preparedness Indicator, and we saw that there are still these gaps between what hiring managers are expecting and what candidates are bringing to the table, we wondered, all right, well, there's a small percentage of people who seem to be giving the hiring managers everything they want. What are those people doing that's different? And this is increasingly important because, as we said, the hiring managers are holding out for the perfect candidate, and few job seekers fit the bill. So what are those who are immediately successful doing right? And when we say immediately successful, we mean people that were either A, active job seekers that secured an offer within 6 months of their first interview, or they're a passive candidate that already had a job and they were recruited and accepted an offer within 6 months of being recruited. So that's pretty successful. If someone is able to get a new job within 6 months, we consider that to be you're doing something right. So there were a couple things here that we learned about what successful job seekers do. And some of these things are things that you would expect, and some of them were kind of surprising, even to us who we do this kind of work all the time. So what's the first thing? They target. This was the #1 thing that we found that was a little bit different than what we expected. The conventional wisdom is that if you just send your resume out to as many people as possible, that it's a numbers game, that eventually something will hit. And in fact, this is the opposite of what we found to be true. 51% of active job seekers applied to 5 or fewer positions, applied, not interviewed. They sent applications or resumes to 5 or fewer positions, and 66 applied to 10 or fewer positions. So the majority of our successful job seekers are really going after specific companies that they want to work at. They also know that they're qualified before putting in those applications. 90% of our successful job seekers felt they needed to be 75% qualified, meaning that they looked at the job description and they said, I meet 7 out of 10 of these criteria before applying, and 41% wanted to be at least 90% qualified before applying. So let's, again, think about that. That's 9 out of 10 things they see in the job description they feel they meet to a T. Now, one thing we didn't see in this research but has been shown in other research is that there's a little bit of a gender difference here. Women tend to want to be more qualified before applying to a job, whereas men will be a little bit more, fly by the seat of their pants. So they might be closer to that 75% qualified, whereas women might be closer to the 90%. Successful job seekers also customize. They, again, do not resume blast, but instead they do their homework significantly on what that organization is looking for before they put together their cover letter, their resume, anything they're going to be using, an online profile. They want to use the keywords that that organization is emphasizing. They perform intelligence gathering, and 67% reached out to the contact person who's listed. This was really surprising to me, that they would be, if someone says, email me your resume, but they would actually email and say, can you tell me a little bit more about the position? 67 is a large number for that. I would have expected that to be lower. So that's interesting for those of you who are job seekers. And 32% reached out to their network to get inside information, meaning they would ask someone in their network, do you know anyone working at this organization? Are you familiar with this department within this organization? And have sort of these back channel conversations about how they could advance their opportunities. And 84% created or updated their resume for each opportunity. This is something that Career Advisory Board has been saying for years. Yes, unfortunately, every resume has to be customized if you want to be taken seriously. And sure enough, that's what successful job seekers are doing. So that the hiring manager picks up the resume and within literally less than 20 seconds is able to assess why that person is a good fit for the specific opportunity to which they are applying. Successful job seekers stay on top of it. This probably isn't as much of a surprise that 73% kept files either online or offline on each opportunity. 64% stuck to a weekly to-do list. And 64% when they have an interview or they apply, they follow up with the contact at least once. They don't wait to hear from them. They make sure they stay top of mind. Now here's something that is really different that I was not expecting. This is probably, of all the stuff I'm going to present today, this was the most surprising, this last one here. The fact that successful job seekers don't necessarily consider job seeking to be a full-time role. And I have to admit, this is counter to the advice that I've always given, which is that if you're on the job market and you're not currently employed, you should be treating your job search like a full-time job, meaning you're spending, 7 to 8 hours a day on it. Well, that's not what our successful job seekers are doing. I'm the first to admit when I'm wrong, and I definitely have been wrong here. 47% will search only 1 to 3 hours a day, and 45% spent less than an hour each day. So whatever they're doing, it's astronomically effective, but also efficient. And when we talk about job search activities, we're not just talking about putting together resumes, we're also talking about networking, we're talking about finding out more about the position, doing your homework. All of that stuff was included when we asked these guys about it. So again, 47%, 1 to 3 hours a day. Very, very surprising. So what's the message here? You don't necessarily have to be doing it. It's not quantity, it's quality. Successful job seekers are realistic. Now, most people were not out for what they thought would be the perfect job. Most accepted jobs that were what they considered superior in only a few ways. So for example, maybe they'd be in their ideal role, but they would have to move geographically. Maybe they really wanted to work in a particular company, but they had to accept a role that wasn't what they were initially looking for. So they're pragmatic. They're saying, there's no such thing as the perfect job situation. There's going to be something upon which I have to compromise. In terms of the offer itself, only 21% felt they received an excellent offer, meaning, wow, I can't believe how much money they just gave me. 61% thought the offer was good enough. It's like, okay, that's a decent salary. The benefits are pretty good. All right, I'll take it. And 19% thought the offer was not good, but they wanted the work. And by the way, an important part of this is that we asked them if they were satisfied. And they said they were satisfied. So even though the offer wasn't good, they wanted the job and they took it. And they said, all right, you know what? It's not the ideal offer, but I'm really happy and satisfied that I got this work. So they're realistic, they're pragmatic, they look at this in an optimistic and positive light. We also asked in this particular study from last summer about critical success factors. What do these job seekers think they're doing to make themselves have a better shot on the market? So communicating directly what they could offer the company was mentioned. The willingness to be flexible, to not necessarily go in and do exactly what you're expected, but to show that you have skills that allow you to be successful and effective in a whole bunch of roles. And then marketable skills, those skills that we mentioned in the Job Preparedness Indicator, things like interpersonal communication, like sales, finance, these transferable skills that are relevant across a wide variety of industries and roles. If you have them, then you're able to show how you can bring them to the table, then hiring managers really like to see that. Critical success traits, willingness to learn even at a senior level, this was seen as being important. Adaptability and confidence. So adaptability speaks to that flexibility and confidence, that you come in and you show in your tone, in your demeanor, that you are able to hit the ground running, do the job right away, and really start making an immediate contribution for the organization. Biggest surprise, we actually did look at age differences in this study. We expected successful job seekers who were baby boomers to be doing things differently from successful job seekers that were millennials. So for example, we thought maybe millennial job seekers that were successful were using more online channels. We thought maybe baby boomers were using more in-person channels. But in fact, we found very negligible differences. Basically across the board, whether you are 65 or whether you are 25, these are the types of things you are doing to be successful. And these are the traits that you have that enable you to get that job that you want, that you're satisfied with, in under 6 months. Leading off into our panel discussion here, I just want to briefly go over the top 6 hot job search trends we're seeing in 2016. First of all, mobile is super hot. A couple years ago, it was sort of a nice to have for organizations to be mobile optimized, for you to be able to apply, for you to be able to even interview, do video interviews. And nowadays, it's actually mandatory that if you're a hiring manager, like we're telling you, you have to have all of your information available to people to view and participate in actively on a mobile device. Passive talent community participation, what that means is that companies are increasingly developing sites and social channels where people can converse about the industry and they can get interesting information, just in general about the role and about the organization, and not necessarily tied to a specific opportunity. And the rationale here is that companies feel like, hey, if I get a whole community of qualified people, like that's my pipeline. So if you haven't been considering, if you're on the job search and you haven't been considering participating in some of these sites that companies are setting up, do that. And even if you're not on the job market, this is a great way to get to know a company that you're interested in and to start getting to know their people who are monitoring and participating in the conversation. Micro-credentials via the massive open online courses. So we are seeing that increasingly hiring managers are taking these seriously. In fact, in the Job Preparedness Indicator research from last year, we found that 80% of hiring managers are willing to consider a micro-credential for a particular skill over and above a traditional college degree. So this is huge, meaning if you aren't able to go full-time, considering getting a certificate or consider taking a course and then showcasing when you're on the interview circuit how that course has helped you master that skill for any gaps that you might have. In-person presentations, this is one that's I'm hearing more and more in 2016, that instead of just coming in and having a conversational interview, people are being required to do a presentation about the role that they plan to fill and that how they think they're going to contribute immediately to the organization. And this shows the hiring managers a whole bunch of things. It shows them you have public speaking skills. It shows them your degree of competence. It shows them your ability to put together a cohesive argument. It really does illustrate a lot, but I think this puts a lot of pressure on job seekers. And I'm seeing this happen more and more, and not just at the senior level, by the way. I have not really hearing this as much at the entry level, although I think in Silicon Valley, it's even common at the entry level. So if you see this or you're being asked for this, don't be surprised. And if you need advice, the Career Advisory Board is here to help you with that. Growing entrepreneurial desire. As the years go by, we just see more and more people saying they want to go out and do their own thing. So we are encouraging organizations to incorporate what's known as intrapreneurship, or the practice of entrepreneurship within an established organization, leveraging the resources of that organization. Because if they don't, these people are going to go out and do their own thing. And so don't necessarily, if you want to start your own business eventually, or you have this entrepreneurial spirit, don't count out established organizations. Listen to what they have to say, because in fact, many organizations are now very innovative places to work. And so, especially we're here at Google, so I mean, what could be a better example of an innovative organization where you can accomplish anything your heart desires if you have a good idea? Mandatory desires of job seekers. They want flex work. This is not surprising. This has been going on for a couple years. Another thing that's kind of come on the radar lately is what is known as cognitive diversity or cognitive inclusion, meaning that job seekers expect to walk into an organization and be appreciated for their full person, for everything that they bring to the table, not just their skills, not even just like the typical diversity, like they're able to check the box to say, you know, I'm an Asian candidate, or I'm an African American candidate, or, you know, I'm a person with a different sexual orientation. But I have different ideas. I have different perspectives. This is what I bring to the table, and this is why you, company, should appreciate it. So we are letting organizations know that they have to be moving their diversity and inclusion programs kind of to the next level, beyond that more typical, like we're going to check a box, to everyone who works in an organization needs to be appreciated and valued. That concludes the official part of our presentation. For all of this research, as well as more tips for job seekers to be successful, please visit our website, careeradvisoryboard.org. And now I'd like to turn it over to Steve for our interactive discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexandra. That was fantastic. And I am going to switch back. We'll just take a second to get us back to stop the screen sharing, and then we are going to be back on camera. Here we are. All right. Hey, we're back. Yeah. So I'll slide over a little bit. Looks like we can. Great.
Here we go.
For better for worse, I think you can see us now. So, you know, before we kind of get into some of the questions that I have prepared, one of the things that Alexandra, maybe you can touch on is the ton of statistics showing that you did such a great job of presenting that successful job seekers do A, B, C, D. Do you think it's kind of more of a correlation or a causation? Are they successful because they're doing these things, or are they doing these things because they're successful? I mean, it's like, if somebody's having a real hard time, like one of the slides that you said, I think that the successful job seekers are applying to a very, very small number of jobs. Yeah. I hear all the time job seekers say applied to 100, 200. Another one, basically, that we've heard forever, finding a job is a job, and that you should be doing that full time. That was really surprising to me. So if you're somebody who is having a hard time finding a job, if you're in career services and advising a student, do you say you should be doing these things, or is it just kind of a natural outcome?
Actually, can I
yes.
Please,
answer that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yesterday,
get the real expert, right?
Steve and I were both at the annual MACE conference, which is the National Association for Colleges and Employers. And what was so astounding is we had, 2,000 people in attendance. The majority of them are career services, probably 80%. The 20% employers. The ideas that are being generated and the tools that are being created. So I'm not surprised that the younger generation coming out of college is so much better prepared for the career search because of all the innovation in career services. So a plug there for career services. So I think that the word is out that there are certain benchmarks they have to meet in order to be a good candidate. And I think it's starting at the career services level, pushing that information out. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I think the word is out. There are ways to do it. There are tools out there to help you.
Yeah, and so take advantage of your career services. Obviously, if you're still in school, it's right at your disposal. And even if you're not in school anymore, if you graduated from an institution, like there are various resources out there to help alumni. And it doesn't necessarily, just because you're no longer there on a daily basis, doesn't mean that you can't take advantage of those. So seek help. As Madeline said, the resources are out there.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo that. At College Recruiter, we've been members of NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, for something like 15 years now. And it is remarkable to me, the change. It's not just all about technology, because technology for technology's sake, who cares? I mean, how long did it take Google to find any revenue? It was like 4 years, and everybody was like, how can you ever make money on search? Well, I think they kind of figured that out. But we see in this year's show, there were a large number of exhibitors that not only had really interesting technology, but it was very easy to see how that could be used by employers, by career services, by candidates. So if a candidate, Alexandra, if a candidate's applying to hundreds of jobs, would you say that they're applying to that many jobs because they're not a good candidate, or would you say, wait a second, I can help you become successful by
I don't think it has anything to do with not being a good candidate. I think the approach is everything. Would be my opinion. This is that if you're not able to get yourself noticed because you're presenting yourself in a light that is not as flattering or isn't as desirable, then you could be the best candidate in the world. But if you can't communicate that, so it probably has to do with the things that you're actually doing, A, B, C, and D, versus inherently you're not a good candidate, and you never will be a good candidate. I think that, does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if they've been doing a lot of things wrong, maybe some things right, it's not that they should just give up. I'll never be a good candidate. This is how I've done it.
And I kind of believe there's no such thing as a bad candidate inherently. Everybody has something to offer, and if you have some gaps, everyone has gaps too. So you just take steps to fill those gaps and present things in a certain way, and you're going to be more successful.
Right. You're not a candidate for 100 jobs.
Yeah.
So you've got to narrow it down. I actually, in my question and answers, I was going to mention this, but at DeVry, just bragging a little bit about DeVry, we teach targeting and customization. That's what we teach. We partner with the academic team, and career advice is throughout embedded in the curriculum. And we received a letter from a student who had just completed her career class, and she said, she did give us permission to read this. My name is Alexis. I'm currently in my 4th session at DeVry, and I'm taking a professional writing course taught by a professor, we won't mention his name. The first assignment we received was to look up a job that would be reasonable to apply to either now or after attaining a degree, and to create a targeted resume for that position. I use the DeVry, My Compass to My Career. That's our tool that we direct our students to for job search techniques and such, as a search tool, and found a job in my city that was very reasonable for me to apply to. I decided to apply for the position and use my targeted reverse chronological resume to apply. A few days later, I went in for an interview. I was offered the position. I accepted, and I now will be working as an accounts payable digital image clerk for a company called DeVita. I went from working as a caregiver part-time to this new position that is full-time and has a higher starting salary. Wow. So there you have where the professor explained how to target, what to look for, how to build in your education, your past experience, and pull it together, and that's the result.
And she was a caregiver before, so that's not a natural transition from that to being this type, to having this type of role. But yet, because she did the right thing, she was able to present her experience in a way that was attractive.
Right, exactly.
And that was one position she applied for. So
it's exciting.
It illustrates that.
Not
research
one with
perfectly.
a couple of zeros at the end of it.
Right, exactly.
So, Madeline, maybe you can kind of elaborate a little bit more about the teaching at DeVry, not asking for a sales pitch, but to use it as an example, because one thing that we see when we're talking to different career service offices or employers about their experiences at schools is that sometimes career services is like a silo.
Right.
And if a student wants help with that, they go across campus, they set up an appointment, they go in. Those schools tend to have a very small percentage. 14, 15% is not unusual of students who use career services before they graduate, which to me is just unbelievable. You know, you're paying tens of thousands of dollars for a degree, and you graduate and you have no idea how to then take that education. What does DeVry do?
DeVry does many different things. The first thing is we have embedded this material into courses, which has been golden, because then our academic team and our career services team are on the exact same page. So we don't get somebody who graduates, shows a resume to a career services person, career services person says, I can't use that resume, and they say, yes, but I got an A in my class. So now we don't have, well, I'm sure we'll still have some issues, but we have a consistent message throughout. The second thing is we have very robust tools online for our students and graduates and alumni, where they can go and they can do an interview in the privacy of their office or home. It's videotaped. They can review it. They can count the ums, the likes. They can see what they look like. They can fix their hair, like I'm doing now, and it prepares them for the interview. We do many other things. That's just a couple of things that we do. But you have to give them the tools, and that's what we do through online. We also have a very strong on-site presence as well. We have over 100 career services people in the field that work face-to-face. But the knee-to-knee advising is definitely waning. And I know that at some point, Alex, you talked about the ability to video interview. We now have given all of our career services folks, actually July 1, they're all going to have a program through a product called Interview Stream, where they will have face-to-face for all encounters with their students and employers, because it's very easy to give them a link and then you do a face-to-face. We're just doing a service to them to get them ready for that. So we do all that. So we do many creative things. But I have to tell you, yesterday being at NACE, there's a lot of good stuff going on out there in career services.
It was interesting that you mentioned Interview Stream, because in the exhibit hall at the conference yesterday, their booth was directly opposite to ours. And the exhibit hall was open Tuesday evening, all day Wednesday, and then most of the day on Thursday. So we had a really good opportunity to talk to them.
They're good people.
They're and it's what they have a ton of competition in that space, a lot of really good products. But it's really interesting because they have a whole sort of employer side where the recruiter is doing video interviewing, and it can be live, kind of like a candidates, 20 candidates, whatever, can answer this. But what I loved was what you mentioned is that they have, I think they call them mock interview. So the students can kind of go on and get prepared. It's to be a weird thing for people to do
You have to get used
the very
to it.
first time.
You have
I
to
mean, I
get
can
used
see,
to it. And you can also forward it to your career advisor for them to review, critique, and get back to you. If you're brave enough, you can even send it to friends and family.
I mean, what I'm hearing you say is that just like you would teach professional writing, for example, you're teaching job search.
Correct.
And it's changing all the time. So whereas 5 years ago, nobody needed to know how to do an interview on YouTube, like now everybody does. And so you guys are at the cutting edge of instructing people on exactly what they need to do. It's a skill like anything else.
Yeah, where none of us are born knowing how to do an interview through a webcam.
But for those of you that we're speaking to today that don't have the advantage of an alumni association that can help you connect to this, or you're not in college, you can find other ways to prepare yourself. If you don't have accessibility to these video tools, ask friends, ask former employers, can I do a mock interview with you? Or better yet, choose a company that you'd like to work at and say, I'm just going through the job search right now. Would somebody do an exploratory interview with me? I'm not looking for a job right now. I just want to have help. And of course, that could actually lead to an opportunity into a job because it's much less threatening. So there are things that you can do. Don't wait for these tools to come your way. Reach out to other people, and at a minimum, do it face-to-face, knee-to-knee.
And tools like Interview Stream are available to the individual too.
Correct.
I mean, you can get a subscription and then get someone to review it and help you out with that. I also am a big fan of informational interviews where, like, I'll just meet up with a contact and say, would you be willing to take 10, 15 minutes to tell me a little bit about your career path? How did you get to where you are? People love to talk about themselves. So it's rare that someone will be like, no, I don't want to do that. And if they're going to respond to you, they're going to respond positively, and then be respectful of their time and don't ask them for anything specific, but just start building the relationship. You never know where something like that's going to go. And you never know who that person knows, either at that target organization or at another organization that's related.
Yeah, and a great question to ask people when you're asking for the informational interview and when you're actually in it is, how did you get to where you are? People love to talk about themselves, and the good, bad, and ugly, they will tell you, I did this, and naturally that ends up sort of leading to you. What did you do differently? Should you go down that? Oh no, don't go down the same path I did. I got into this. I know you want to do the same thing as me, but I can save you 5 years.
Yeah.
So Alex, the qualities that you were talking about during the presentation was that list of 22, 23 of them or whatever. Which of those do you think resonate most with the recruiters?
Believe it or not, it's the integrity. It's the character. It's showing that you have a history of being respectful, of being ethical, and that if you come into an organization and the organization trusts you with all this proprietary information, with their clients, that you're going to do right by them. I think that this is something we didn't see 15 years ago. It wasn't on companies' radars that all of a sudden we have these reputations we need to protect, and actually there are regulations and compliance issues in most organizations. So being able to bring somebody in who they can trust is probably the most important thing right now. It goes above and beyond any specific skill related to the job.
Yep. In relation to even getting called in for interviews, trust begins at the resume level.
Yes.
And so if you
point.
send a resume that has a job title, but you have all of these grandiose things that you've been in charge of and you've done, they take one look at it and say, you know what, I'm not feeling good about this. So the honesty and representing and demonstrating the honesty starts at the resume.
Yeah, that's a great
thing. Keep that in mind.
And we've certainly seen over the last maybe 5 years a number of very high-profile people, football coaches, etc., that have found their way to the unemployment line because they had something in their record. I remember there was one maybe a year ago. I think he didn't put it onto his resume, but somebody started to give him credit for something that he didn't do. I don't remember. It doesn't really matter. And he never corrected it. It sounded good. Hey, that would have been cool if I had done that. And it just became part of his legacy.
It follows you.
Right.
So even if you put it on your resume 10 years ago, but it starts to come back to haunt you.
Alexander, people believe some of the traits, such as you were talking about being organized, being ethical, that you either have those or you don't. Do you think that successful candidates just simply have those traits, or are those the sorts of things that people can develop?
I think by and large, they're things that people need to develop. And just like we were talking about with the video interviewing, it's not natural to think like, well, here's this camera right here. Like I should be looking at it and smiling and making sure my head is this distance above the top of the screen or below. And that's not natural. So I think most of these things can and should be taught. And there are always things like being organized and being conscientious. I mean, those are things that you can measure personality for, right? Some people are naturally better at, well, I have this filing system for these job opportunities, and some people are just more all over the place. But I think the important thing is to realize where you can need to improve and then seek out the resources to make that happen. But don't just say, oh, well, I'm not an organized person, so I guess I'm not going to be a successful job seeker. And taking it into your own hands and saying, well, how can I become more organized? What tools can I use that are available to me? And what help can I get? What mentors can I tap to become a more effective interpersonal communicator, for example? Some people might say, hey, I'm an introvert, so I'm never going to be able to do this video interviewing thing. Like, I'm way too intimidated. Well, you're shutting yourself down. You're decreasing your own potential by that. So have someone help you with it, and you'll practice. It's all about practice and development, and nobody is perfect. Even the successful job seekers will tell you that at some point they didn't do this stuff as well, but they've learned over time.
Yeah, and Madeline, do you want to elaborate on the mentorship? Because I can hear
I
you really pick up on that.
Right. For those in the audience that are leaders now and supervise people, be courageous and help people when you see them going down a wrong path. Help them with that. Stop them when you see them about to demolish their career, either with little things or big things. So that's the reverse of going out and finding a mentor. I'm asking people to be a good mentor and tell people straight up, here's where, if you continue doing these things, you're going to find yourself elsewhere. And let me help you. I'll help you. Let's work together. So those of you that are in a leadership position, just have managerial courage and help people, because people can learn, but they're allowed to continue these certain behaviors. They find themselves out of a job and they say, well, how did that happen? That darn company, because nobody was brave.
They don't know what they don't know.
They don't know what they don't know. And so for those of you that are in the job market now, look for a mentor. Look for somebody that you either know or don't know. Through LinkedIn, go an industry that you're interested in, go to LinkedIn, contact them and say, I don't know you, but I admire your profile. I admire the things that you've done. I admire the company that you are with. Do you know someone that could mentor me in the same field? So use the social media to gently request. You might get shut down, but you might not.
Yeah, I had an opportunity probably 15 years ago now, career service office. I can't recall if he was the director or assistant director, but it was at Emory University in Atlanta. And he had a student who was attending Emory in their undergraduate business program. I live in Minneapolis. This student was from Minneapolis, and he wanted to move back. I think he wanted to find an internship in Minneapolis between his junior and senior year. The career service office director reached out to me and said, I know you're from Minneapolis. We met such and such a place. This kid is great. We just have very limited information here in Atlanta about internship opportunities in Minneapolis. It was kind of early internet time. It was kind of like he wasn't just a few clicks away from finding a job posting. Career service office person connected me with him. I'm still in touch with the mentee today. It was far more rewarding for me than it was for him. And it was phenomenal. He went to, I helped him kind of open the door, and that's about it, to outstanding internship at Northwestern Mutual Financial. He found out that he had exactly the right skills, qualities, everything, except that he hated the job. But it was fine. I mean, on paper, it lined up perfectly, but it was internships are kind of attempt to perm. We try you out, you try us out. If it's a great fit, fantastic. But I know he talked incredibly well about the internship program, about the organization, but it's like, I'm not a good fit. Then he goes over and gets an internship at CNN, and then at ESPN, and away he was. But I still hear from him 2-3 times a year.
Wonderful.
Email, Facebook, whatever.
Good for him
just
for
staying
keeping
in
up that
touch.
relationship.
Yeah, and he recently sort of needed, he recently needed a little bit of help with a career-related issue. And you can bet your life I was happy to jump all over that. So, reach out to career services. When you were talking about LinkedIn, I think if people can look on LinkedIn for somebody in the organization, not in HR, not in a recruiting capacity, unless they're looking to get into HR, but look for somebody who's in a similar position that you want to be in, say, 3 to 5 years from now. I want to follow in your path. I want to be who you are. People really respond to that.
And one thing that the Career Advisory Board has talked about in the past is when you're trying to meet people and you are reaching out and putting feelers out there, practice what we like to call the 3-6 rule of networking, which is that recognize not everyone is going to be responsive to you. Like, that's just the way of the world. It's nothing personal. And so what you should do to avoid being a stalker networker is email someone 3 times within a 6-week period. And if they don't respond to you with those 3 initial contacts, move on to somebody who will be more receptive. And that way, you're not wasting your time, and hopefully you're not bothering them too much.
Yeah, so. and cordial, no guilt trips.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I will sometimes get that initial email like, I want you to help me, and if you don't, then all of these terrible things are going to happen.
I mean, why should they? Why should you?
It's not an inspiring thing.
No, of course not. Why should you?
Yeah. Madeline, earlier in the presentation, Alexander was talking about millennial job seekers versus Gen Xers. I'm a member of Gen X, baby boomers, and seeing surprisingly little difference. Are you seeing the same thing? Because DeVry has a wide range of students.
It doesn't surprise me in the least, because candidates of all ages are facing the same types of challenges with new modalities, new techniques, and all of the basic confusion that goes on within your head when you're trying to apply for a job. the hardest thing for somebody to do is write their own resume. And that's true whether they're just starting out or whether they're re-entering the workforce or they've been in the workforce and want to change. So all of the things that we find during our JPI, I think it's across the board. It's across the board. And you see the biggest challenges are for those that are the most experienced. They're the ones that have the biggest gaps from what the employers are looking for. So age and experience doesn't necessarily make you the best candidate. Some yes, but not necessarily. So it comes as no surprise. And yes, DeVry works with about 25% traditional college and university, and then for 75 not. We have military, which is a whole different ball of wax. So we have a lot of military, about 14% of our population is military. So it's out there, we have it. And so I'm not at all surprised.
Cool. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
You good? I'm going to put, Alex, I'm going to let you kind of close it up.
Okay.
When thinking about all the things we talked about today, is there like a hot job search issue trend that you think we didn't touch on that we have time for?
Okay. Well, one thing that we have not touched on that I think is gaining rapid acceptance and speed is the app side of things. There's an organization I just started working with called Switch, where it's basically like Tinder for job seekers, where you just get a very quick presentation of a job from a recruiter and you're swiped to the left. I forget which direction is which, but it's like left if you're interested, right if you're not, and everything just happens at a much faster pace. And you get to review a lot more opportunities in a lot more succinct way than you're typically accustomed to with the traditional application process. So I see Switch and a couple other competitors gaining speed and agility in this area and definitely getting funding. So whenever something gets a lot of funding and everyone starts to pay attention, like, wow, there's really a market for this, because they've had to prove that there is in order to get that funding. So.
Yeah, and Monster just acquired one of their competitors.
Oh, yes, you're right. What was the name?
Jobber.
Yeah.
Jobr. But it has a similar kind of model.
Yeah.
There are a few of them that are definitely sort of in the leading areas. And Switch, Jobber. There are a couple of others that are up like that. Yeah, it's like swipe left if you like it, swipe right if you don't. That's interesting. As we wrap up, do you want to remind people, if they want more information on the Career Advisory Board, what they should do?
Absolutely. So for any more information about this research or more tips that the Career Advisory Board has for job seekers that are facing all the challenges of the 24th century workforce, please visit our website, careeradvisoryboard.org, and contact us anytime. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Kristen, and thanks to Google for hosting us today.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, Google, you have a nice house.